Earlier today, LeBron James's agent, Rich Paul, who's also the the co-founder of Clutch Sports, spoke out today about how he felt about the legacy of the Big Three in Miami. He was on the Pat McAfee show, and I'm just going to read out what he had to say. I always love a big two, Paul said. I don't really love a big three. People talk big three, but the big three thing has never really worked. And you'll say, well, what happened in Miami? That wasn't really a big three. There were three guys that went in the lottery and they did really well individually on their teams. So they had big numbers and had big accomplishments. But when you think about it, Bosh was the ultimate professional. He took a back seat and he played a role. His approach to everything is what made that work. This to me was like some kind of mental gymnastics and gaslighting by Rich Paul, that he was trying to downplay just there being a big three in Miami by saying that, well, it wasn't really a big three because Chris Bosh took a back seat. So it's not really, granted, it looks like a big three, but it's not really a big three, which is a bunch of bullshit. Yes, Chris Bosh did take a back seat as a third option, but he was still a great player in Miami. He was still going to the All-Star game every year when he was with Miami. So that's a gross exaggeration right there about Chris Bosh. And it's easy to dismiss Chris Bosh's achievements and whatnot because when you hear his interviews, he comes across as this super fruity guy, this geeky, nerdy guy that you don't really take seriously because he just seems very goofy. But make no mistake, Chris Bosh is a legit Hall of Famer. I believe he got into the Hall of Fame several years back, and he deserved to get in there. This man was an 11-time All-Star, All NBA second team once, All NBA rookie first team, and I think, yeah, he just made the All NBA second team once. And I know some people will say, like, well, for a guy who's an 11-time All-Star, he only made one All NBA second team. But you have to remember the era Chris Bosh came out in was the most competitive era when it came to power forwards. Chris Bosh got drafted during the golden era of the power forward. You had Tim Duncan, you had Kevin Garnett, you had Dirk Nowitzki, you had Pau Gasol, you had Amari Stoudemire. So you had all these guys, and I've left out some names too. Just Rasheed Wallace, another guy that he was competing with all those guys back then. It was a very competitive position in the league. I would say probably the most competitive position during all the 2000s and into the early 2010s, the power forward position. It was just hyper competitive, and he held his own during that time period. Just he was an amazing player. And I think people forget that look at what he when you look at what he did in Toronto. He was pretty impressive. He led that team post Vince Carter to a few playoff appearances. Granted, they didn't get out of the first round, but he was able to lead them to the playoffs. In my eyes, you're a legit star if you can consistently lead your team to the playoffs. And Chris Bosh was doing that when he was in Toronto. He was doing that consistently as a Raptor. They may not had like great success, but he got them to the playoffs. So you can't really knock him on that right there. And you look at his numbers when he was with the Raptors, he was getting, I think, 22 points per game consistently, and he was getting about 10 rebounds. So he was a 22 and 10 player consistently during his time in Toronto. Not many guys can put up those types of numbers. 2010 to me is still a benchmark for being a above average to great big man. Even in this current era in the NBA, if you have a big that gets you 2010, you have a pretty damn good big man out there. Bosh was doing that. So I think Rich Paul was definitely downplaying just the impact Chris Bosh had on Miami. They were a super team with Chris Bosh. They had Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, and LeBron all at the start of their primes. That's just a false thing to say that this was not a big three. Sure, Bosch's numbers went down to some degree in Miami when he was there. You just look at his averages. His first 2 years with Miami, he was averaging 18 points a game, 8.3 rebounds, 7.9 rebounds. It went down a little bit during the final 2 years of his time with the Heatles, which was he was averaging 16.6 points per game, 16.2. And it's interesting, once LeBron left, that first year without LeBron in Miami, he was back to averaging like 21 points a game, and he was getting 7 rebounds. So I would say LeBron really did hold Chris Bosh's numbers back, if we're being honest here. But it was a legit big three. Without Chris Bosh, Miami would not have gone out of the East. They wouldn't have gone out of the East, because I remember there was a stretch in LeBron James's career where he could not defeat the Celtics. Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett were huge thorns for him. Paul Pierce could match him when it came to just the offensive end of the court. He could cancel out LeBron by scoring just about as many points as LeBron was getting. And then you had Kevin Garnett, who was a problem on both ends of the court, offensively and defensively. And there was just nobody on LeBron's teams in Cleveland that could really check Kevin Garnett and just put him in his place. Chris Bosh was that guy for LeBron in Miami. Whenever they faced the Celtics, Chris Bosh was able to slow down Kevin Garnett and in some games just shut him down and take him out of it. They would not have beaten the Celtics in 2011 or 2012 without Chris Bosh, and they really needed him in 2012 in that series. He wasn't great in that series in the conference finals against Boston because he missed the first 3 or 4 games due to injury, but those last 3 games, he was huge. He was huge in like turning the momentum back into Miami's favor and winning that series, especially in that game 7. He got like 18 points on 8 or 10 shooting. So that's bullshit to say that he wasn't a factor on that team. And I remember even against the Spurs, granted, Tim Duncan still got great numbers against Bosh, but Bosh was a defensive force in that series in 2013 with the Spurs. If they didn't have Chris Bosh, I'm convinced that Spurs team would have swept Miami or beaten them in 5 games and would have beaten them just badly. Like it would have been humiliating. Bosh's defense was so integral to that team. He was their defensive anchor, their rim protector. He was a huge part of what they did. So to say that he was just a role player, that's not true. He was still a legit all-star while playing with those guys. And I just think what Rich Paul is doing by diminishing Chris Bosh's achievements is he's trying to enhance LeBron's legacy. We know that. He is LeBron's boy. They are business partners. They are friends. They are joined to the hip. He's going to be biased as fuck. He's basically the equivalent of state media for LeBron. Like, he's going to be LeBron's PR guy. So obviously he's going to put Bosh down because that LeBron is probably not close to Bosh. I'm assuming that. I know LeBron has a better relationship with Wade than Bosh. So that's the guy they're going to throw underneath the bus to build up LeBron's legacy. This is all about trying to find ways to enhance LeBron's legacy as his career is coming to a close. Granted, I haven't played for 5 more years because this guy's on like fucking HDH, but they had to find ways to enhance his legacy because they wanted to make the argument he's a GOAT. And one of the biggest arguments against LeBron being the GOAT was that he needed a super team to win his first 2 titles. So that always hurts the argument to a large degree when comparing him to MJ, because the Chicago Bulls were never a super team. I know some people try to argue the second three-peat was, but no, they weren't. They didn't have like a third legit all-star on either of those for those three-peat teams, or as a first or second. But like I said, they're trying to argue that LeBron was similar, that he never had a super team, and just his teams were similar to Michael's team. So that's another reason why you got to say he's a GOAT. It's very cheesy and pathetic. But these guys are obsessed in trying to make LeBron the GOAT, trying to promote him in as many ways as possible. They're relentless. It's like a 24/7 machine they have going on when it comes to LeBron and Clutch Sports, Rich Paul, and all these media people. Like, he's relentless. Granted, he won't succeed. I don't see how he ever becomes a GOAT now. Even if he somehow ties MJ, he's still not the GOAT because it took him so much longer. It took the man like like over 20 plus years to do it. If he somehow achieves tying MJ, I don't see him passing him when it comes to ring count. I think it's too late for that, but it's gonna fail. He's not gonna succeed at it. That's why I think it's laughable and pathetic that he can't just enjoy his career and be proud of his achievements and just accept that, hey, he's a top 10 player. That should be good enough, but he's an example of how narcissists are never happy despite having pretty much the whole entire world in their hand. They still can't really enjoy life, and he's the best example of that. But like I said, I found what they tried to do to Chris Bosh, excuse me, and trying to downplay his legacy as just pathetic. And yeah, that's all I have to say about it.